Okay, testing. Okay, so just setting up again and just getting the new chat window open. Drag that over there. Say hey everyone. So if you're joining this chat, unfortunately I've had to abandon the scheduled one. I was having problems with mics. I actually brought my mic in, and then when that wasn't working, I was trying someone else's mic, and that wasn't working. Not 100% sure. It's USB. Maybe this computer is underpowered, but I'm now back on the normal microphone. And but unfortunately, last week there were complaints that the computer's built-in microphone was a bit quiet. So okay, so Sonia, you've joined. I'll just ask nicely if you can hear me. Fingers crossed, Sonia, you'll say yes. Oh, thank goodness, that's great. Okay, I can breathe again. Oh gosh, I've got so many windows open now. Okay, so let me just set up. I'm just setting up the window here. Maybe I'll just quickly try and add this to the YouTube playlist. Edit video. Okay, so I'm just dragging this video back up to the top so that it's obvious to anyone coming in. Come on, you can make it up to the top. Thank you. Okay. Okay, hello everyone. Sonia, you're with us. I'm just wondering if the Aramith, Darren, and Amia that was just with us before. Andres, yes, you were there. I knew it began with A, so I'm glad you're here. Okay, so let me jump back. Now what's, oh sorry, now I need to mute my mic. How ironic, just need to have a cough. Okay, so hopefully you will have received a message. The school has started asking for course evaluation feedback. So please fill that in. Don't be in too much of a rush, but if you can fill that in when you've got a quiet moment, that really helps us out. And as I say here, it does help us improve the course. Now, in assignment 3, I was promoting the use of indexed and associative arrays in JavaScript. And what I want to show you, first of all, is how it's done in PHP. The syntax is fairly similar, but there are some subtle differences. So Sonia, you're saying the video is fuzzy. My apologies about that. Hopefully, in my rush to get it loaded, I may have forgotten to click the low latency. So my apologies for that. I am at RMIT, so we do have a good upload. So if you switch to a lower resolution in the settings, you may be able to get a more suitable resolution. It might be broadcasting to you in 4K. My apologies, I usually bump that down so that it's more more friendly, I'll say, for people on low bandwidth. So what I've got here is, so this is how we would set up, say, a simple indexed array in PHP. And if you want to write that to the screen, you just write numbers2. And if you want to log it to the console, so that's sort of for debugging, you can just pop that down the bottom. Excellent. I'm glad to hear you've got that settings now, Sonia. Yeah, so the little cog, just bring that back from 4K and it should be okay. So in PHP, obviously we have PHP tags, and remember this is being processed on the server, so the user won't see any sort of JavaScript code or anything. This is being prepared, and it will leave the server completely processed. So there's no problems with the computer not running JavaScript or anything like that. So when creating an array in PHP, the old way, we used to have to say array, but quite a few years ago now, and probably getting on for 10 years ago, PHP caught up with the times and allowed you to create an array with just square brackets. But previously, on a very old server, odds are you'll never run into this problem, but on a very old server, you had to use the array function to create an array. Now, if you want to print something, you can just echo that to the screen. So nice and simple. And you'll see this a lot in PHP. There are often more than one function. I'll say that again. There are often more than one function to do something, and you can either echo something or print something to the screen. There's very little to do with, very little difference with these two functions. And if you want to see structure, PHP has got this very useful function, print_r numbers. So that will print out the array to the screen, but it will also print out the structure. So you'll get to see the indexes and the values as well. Very useful for post, which we'll see in a moment. Now there's another little bonus. If you say true, print_r will return this. Oops, let me just get the spacing right there. Sorry about that. If you pass true as a parameter, it will return the output as a string. So if you want to assign the assign the output to a variable for later on, you can actually get this as a string. But if you just want to print it to the screen, it's just print_r and the array. And in JavaScript, if we want to have a for loop that goes over an indexed array, we just say for let I equal 0, I is less than the size of the array, I++, and we can echo out, we can write to the document numbers I plus, say, a BR tag. Now, in PHP, there's a little quirk that there is no length property on an array. That might be changing, hopefully. If it hasn't changed already, it might be a thing in PHP version 7. But definitely the old way, we actually had to count the elements in an array and assign that to a length. And then what we do is we just use that variable in the loop. So if you don't do it this way, the function count numbers will run every time you do the loop, and it does slow your code down a little bit. So this is the most time efficient way and processor efficient way of setting up an, just a simple array for loop to iterate over an array. I'm getting very tongue-tied here. So are there any questions so far about these two simple examples? And hey to Elliot, I didn't see you before in the previous aborted chat, but I'm just saying hi to you now. Oh, by the way, is the sound better this week? I actually found an extra setting to not only can you increase the microphone volume input, there's also a boost slider, so I popped that up as well, hoping that the sound this week is a little better than last week. Okay, so Andre's saying sounds good. Excellent. I'll be brave and move on. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is look at associative arrays in PHP. And associative arrays, arrays in PHP is very important because a lot of things do come in key value pairs or name value pairs. And so in JavaScript, when we set up an associative array or an object, as they like to say in JavaScript, we had to use the curly braces. So for some reason, JavaScript, we need the curly braces when we're setting up an object. And keys, you can have quotes. In fact, if you go into JSON, quotes are required. But JavaScript basically allows you to have unquoted keys if you wish, but the values must be quoted. Oh, Andre, you've lost the video. Just want to make sure if anyone else has lost the video. The video is coming through on my end. Let me just check. Okay, it's yeah, not coming through here. Okay, I'm just going to pause the camera and turn it back on. Gosh, I'm at RMIT. It's supposed to have really good bandwidth here. What's going on? So let me turn the screen share off, turn the screen share on. Fingers crossed that will come through in a moment. Not looking good my end. I'm not going to have to start this a third time, am I? Oh, hang on. Am I getting something? Oh, okay. I've got my test window. The screen has just come back. So I'm hoping. Okay, thank you, Sonia. Cool. It's back. Okay, so maybe I'll pop this window under the other window so I can see two previews. You know, there's one thing I thought, oh, at least if I have to present at RMIT, the facilities will be better, but microphone and video not doing so well. Okay, so where was I when I left off? So what I was saying was this is how we set up objects or associative arrays in PHP. I'll just do this, just make sure everyone's up to speed. In JSON, you can put quotes around the keys, and I think JavaScript says it's optional, but you're allowed to have unquoted keys. In PHP, quotes are required, so we need quotes around the keys as well as around the values. And PHP makes no differentiation between associative arrays or indexed arrays. So you can either use the array function or the square brackets, which is really nice. But the one thing that PHP has is they use the fat arrow, as we call it. So it's the equal sign and greater than sign together. And that's how they connect a key with a value. So JavaScript uses the colon to connect a key and a value, but PHP uses the fat arrow, which is a little bit of extra typing. But we can use the square brackets to create an associative array, and to echo out something, it's exactly the same. The difference is we don't get this syntax, but you might be able to get away with and I'm just going to pop this in. So in PHP, this is how you access an object's methods or properties. So you might be able to get away with that or that. But I think you actually have to specify that you're creating an object rather than an associative array when you're using PHP. So I'm not saying that will work, but it might well work. So I'll just delete that, just so no one gets confused. And I've got this is a sample of if you like, a for loop that iterates over an associative array. So as I've covered in a previous chat, when you're iterating over a key value object where keys and values are connected, you don't know what the index is, so you need a for in loop that returns both the key as well as an element in that array. So in order to write out this in JavaScript, you need a for in loop. So this is syntax is quite intuitive. And you say write key plus something plus the letters key, and say a BR element here. Now the PHP, and I'm a little bit disappointed because I'm not a fan of the actual for each syntax. So instead of a for in loop, we use a for each loop. So a bit of a difference here. And instead of saying for each, key in letters, we actually have a bit of a clunky syntax. So we say for each, then we specify the array name. And we're breaking up this array as a key and a letter each time we go around the loop. And we need to have this as well, just to separate the key from the value. So I think the syntax here is a little bit clunky, a little bit less intuitive, but one of the nice things about PHP is instead of having to say letters, square brackets, key, this is the value, and you can just write the value out. So when you're nesting associative arrays, the syntax is actually quite simple inside. So this bit I really like about PHP. I'm hoping JavaScript catch up and do a similar thing. Be nice to say let key in letters as value or something. That would be super duper. The other nice thing about PHP, if you use double quotes, it actually has meaning. So what it'll do is it will go through. So instead of having to break it up like this, and saying plus a string plus a string, PHP will go through the string and say, oh, this looks like a variable. I'll substitute this and put the value of key in there, and then I'll put in this char, and oh, that also looks like a variable. I'll look that up and then put in a BR tag. So the string goes from being really clunky to being really short in double quotes. So if you use single quotes, you don't get this feature, and you'll have to split up the string. But PHP, when you use double quotes, it allows you just to write the variables as you go. And what I'm trying to get to is, I'm trying to get to a more complex array, or a more complex structure where it's not just a one-dimensional array or a sort of square two-dimensional array. We can actually think about real-world objects and break them into sort of more complicated tree-like structures. So I've got an example here, a stupid pizza. And so this is just an indexed array, and I put in these comments, but this will probably mess the array up a little bit. But if you imagine this is all written out on one line, saying large, thin, capricosa, and the amount, you would need to know the order that things are in. And if a developer down the track makes a mistake and accidentally puts thin in front of large, you'll have a thin tray, and you want it, the values won't make sense if the order is important. So an associative array, and I've got a smart pizza here, but we're going to see an even smarter pizza in a moment. What you do is you supply the key and connect it with a value, and then it doesn't matter what sort of order these come in. So I could reverse the order and it won't matter, because it doesn't matter how and what order the keys are supplied, they're all connected to the value of the key. And if you think about your HTML forms, you might want to rearrange the order of form elements in your form, and because they're all name value pairs, it doesn't matter what order they come through to the server, because the server will match the key with the value, and the layout of your form does not matter. And I just want to make this very clear. A lot of places you read, they'll talk about keys and names. So they might say a key value pair. Other times they might say name value pair. There's no difference. It's just a accident of history that both names are in wide use. So I've got a bit of a question here. So if you echo out my pizza size, it will go through the array and say, okay, that's large. And if you say price, it will say $15.5 or Deutschmarks or euros or whatever the currency is. So this was the activity I was getting to, which I had in the back of my mind. So this is a more complicated pizza, but this pizza is more reflective of what goes on in the real world. So when you order a pizza, you'll have a size. So the size is large, the base is thin, the type is capricciosa. And then, you know, the customer might say, actually, do you know what? I might have some extras on my pizza. And so extras is an indexed array. No, it's not. It's an associative array. My bad. And what you've got is you've got a couple of things inside here. So I want triple cheese. I would like anchovies, and I would also like pineapple as well. So you can imagine in these extras, you might even have, let's just say someone does like olives. You could even throw in olives is pointing to false. So not only is it extras, but it's also like holding toppings. I really should be, maybe I should change that to toppings. I think that would make more sense. I might think about that. So extras or toppings, I'm using that term interchangeably. So what I'm trying to say is, whenever you're thinking about objects, try and think about putting as much into, say, one structure as possible, and you can then have all your data in one place. And when you've set up your objects, it's very easy to extract the information out of it, because you can think of it in terms of like a tree-like structure, and you're not having to like join things together. So in the assignments so far, I've seen a lot of, you know, you'll be saying the movie code ACT is for the action, but I'm seeing a lot of synopsis box 1, synopsis box 2. So what I'd really like to see is synopsis box ACT and synopsis box ANM. So when you're using consistent codes, it suddenly makes things a lot easier to automate, so that if in the future the cinema expands to, say, 10 genres, maybe they say build a second or third screen, you won't have to rewrite all your code, because if you use consistent codes, movie codes, you can just basically write for loops that just will receive more options and output more values. So that's a little bit of advice, and I'm sort of looking for that in the final assignment. So when you're outputting from an associative array, and when there's, if you like, you're starting to get branches inside the array, if you like the first simple layer, you just say my pizza base, so that will return thin. But if you want an extras, you actually have to go into the extras array, and then from there you get the cheese, and that will echo out triple. So I think about this in terms of on a hard drive, you might have a folder inside a folder, so it's quite intuitive. If you think of these as folders, and inside the folder, you know, there's another folder, and inside that folder there's a value or a file, so to speak. That kind of thinking does make this sort of structure very simple. So I've got a couple of tests here, and I'm just going to mute for a second. But before I mute, I'll be asking you for questions. So I'd just like to have some guesses as to what go in these blank boxes. To play some sort of thinking music, perhaps. Yep, so Andre's got it. So we pop extras in the first box and anchovies in the second box, and that'll be true. And obviously this is a website, but you could easily have, if you had a robot connected to the web page, we will be getting the server to write to a file, so it's not totally inconceivable, but you might even have like a sort of robot pizza maker execute the add anchovies function, which will actually move its arm and drop anchovies on the pizza. It's not that far away, and I'm pretty sure it's been invented, to be blunt, I think. So what I'm encouraging you to do is to have another look at what's been submitted from your bookings area. Is that right? Yes. Yeah, so when you're booking a seat or a screening at the cinema, what you'll see is you'll actually see, because you've named the elements in a particular way, when you click the post, what's in post, you'll actually see that a tree-like structure has come down to the server. And all the data is grouped together, so you don't have all the seats and names and the movie codes all mixed together. You actually have 3 separate arrays, and so all the data you need to process the order is in 3 sort of boxes, essentially. And the other little trick is the keys aren't numeric, they're all made up of key value pairs. So receiving and processing get and post. So this is what tonight's big topic is. Hopefully by the end of tonight, you'll be able to process post data. So you'll have your own processing script, and you'll be able to start to, instead of relying on my processing script, you can write your own processing script to see what's going on. Now, Sonia's asked a question: can you still iterate through an associative array the same way as an indexed array? The for each loop will iterate through an indexed array, but a for I equals 0, I is less than the length, that will not work for an associative array. PHP might deliver something, but it will definitely be very temperamental. But the nice thing is, and I do this a lot, I'll use the for each loop to iterate through any array, because getting the value, getting that value string can be anything, by the way. In fact, I strongly recommend you say iterate through, name the value and the key something sensible, so that if you have another loop inside, it will make sense to you. So we won't be using the get method, but if you don't mind the whole world seeing what the form is sending to the client, then you can definitely use the get method. So we're going to try and stick to using post, and so we'll be basically looking inside the super global post variable for data coming back from the form. So basically this is how you access raw, and I will say this, raw post data. This is a little bit dangerous. This is like eating uncooked chicken. Just a bit of advice. We will want to clean this up in a moment. So all we need to do is basically the name of the field. I was hoping Andre was going to come in there with the answer. So in here goes, oh, Andre, letting me down. I was hoping to time this perfectly. Okay, I'll just say it. Hopefully Andre will post as I'm saying it. So the name, first name, so this will produce the key. And to find that, we just type in first name into this box here, and we'll get the value of the first name field popping into the first name variable. Now, if we get JavaScript to check the client's form, and that's what assignment 3 was about, 99 times out of 100, the processing script will have an easy job. But we do need to account for the fact that some people don't have JavaScript enabled on their computers. And we also need to anticipate that, you know, hackers will try and turn it off and might try to submit bad data into our server. So we do need to get the server to do a second validation check. So it's a little bit like, you know, if you go to, say, Social Security or Medicare, they'll get you to fill in the form and they'll ask you to check the form, but they will still run a quick check to make sure that you filled in the form correctly. They won't just trust you and get that form processed without checking. So one thing we need to do is we need to check to see if things are set. So you can say if is set. So, you know, check to see that something is set, such as last name. And only then should you assign the value of what's in post to the, you know, the last name variable that you're setting up. So if, let's just say this is not, this hasn't been sent, this would generate, it's not too high an error. It's usually just a notice saying that you're trying to access an unregistered variable. So it's very annoying to see little notices popping up in your script. And PHP has got some other checks, and I won't give this away too much. I wouldn't mind. Obviously, some of these tutes are test. Oh wait, hang on. No, I think this is the first tute where I don't ask you to submit your answers. So it's not necessary. If your score ends up on the borderline, all your answers submitted so far will determine whether you get promoted. So what we've got here is we've got you want to check to see if something is set, and if you check to see if something is empty, what am I saying here? If not empty, okay, yeah, sorry, I'm just getting confused here. I saw the not sign. So you want to check to see if something is not empty. So you say not empty. And the let's just say this is the email. Now, this is the great thing in PHP. We used to have to use regular expressions for everything, but PHP does a lot of standard checks for us. So there's a function called filter_var, and so filter_var goes here, and you supply the variable that you're testing, which in this case is email, and there's a flag. So you say filter underscore validate underscore, and if you type in email, PHP will actually check that string and return true or false, depending on whether this check is passable. And the filter bar function runs checks for many types of variables. So you can check to see if something's an integer, a float number. So good for seats. So you'll want to run a check to make sure that someone's not ordering 1.5 seats. Somebody might be being playful and hacking your form, so they can select 1.5. So we want to just to make sure that not only is the email valid, but we also want to make sure that the seat numbers being submitted are also valid. So a little bit of a hint, we will be messing with you to see if we can order half a seat and maybe get a half price child's seat that way. There's also an option, these are sort of simpler functions. So you can check to see if a field is numeric. So if you just want to see whether it's a whole number or a floating point number, you can say is numeric, and the just pop in age into this box here, and then you say age is equal to this value. And if it's not numeric, you might want to then sort of fail gracefully and maybe print a server-side message saying, stop messing with our JavaScript, you hackers. In fact, I think I've even made a sort of semi-humorous suggestion. You might like to try that in assignment 4. Now, there's another thing. I've just got this question here. Sometimes users accidentally submit white space when filling in a form. So I thought about this. If you're submitting a password, so if you're storing a password, someone might have accidentally hit the space bar when they were typing out their password, and they'd get very frustrated. So sometimes it's nice just to use the trim function. So you can use trim to clean the leading spaces off a string, or the trailing spaces, or basically any spaces around the first letter and the last letter, or non-space character in a string. So that's something to think about. It does one thing which one student pointed out to me one year. It does mean you can't have spaces beginning your password or ending your password. That's one thing you might think about. But it's sometimes a courtesy thing just to tidy up input from users. Certainly first name. I don't think anyone has a first name that begins with space. So that's something that might be worth checking. So activity 3, so I'm just going into more detail on the filters and sanitizers. So we saw before the filter bar function can return true or false, depending on whether something conforms to a certain pattern. But you can also supply a different flag to sanitize data. And I think basically PHP is working on a best practice. So if you install a more modern version of PHP, and someone in the PHP community has decided to upgrade that function to behave better, then obviously the next version, it will be even better at checking. So I've got an example here of where we use both together in conjunction. So you might want to say, do a validate check to return true or false using filter var. And if you're happy, echo valid email or do something a bit more sophisticated. But if that fails, you might think, well, maybe there's some minor mistakes. Maybe they hit, the quote thing, which is next to the enter key or something. So you can say, did you mean to type? And then filter var, when you supply a sanitizing flag, it will go through and remove any offending characters. So so I think I'm actually missing a string here. So let's just say I had Alice Carroll and there were some random characters in there. It'll actually clean it up as best as possible and just have legal values left. So, you know, that you might say yes and then allow that email through. So I'll just make a point that whilst this is good, don't rely on it 100%. It's not an alternative to a human, basically. Now the next example, I'm sort of enclosing this for completeness. You can actually specify an associative array as a parameter, which is something you might want to know about in PHP. It is a little bit messy, and I think it's probably just as easy to write code to check to see whether it's less than a number or greater than a number. But some students do like to, you know, use the full scope of a function, and so I just want to show that the filter bar even allows you to supply an indexed array, sorry, an associative array of options to say, you know, the number must be between a minimum range and a maximum range. And this is important. If you're checking numbers, don't take this shortcut. So this will return false, but it could also return 0. So false can get cast as 0, so you have to be really careful. So I'm using the triple equal sign here because PHP is a weakly typed language, and I want to make sure that it's equal to false and not a number in this case. And so what I'm saying here is because the person is not between this age range, we know that they're either too young or too old, or maybe have passed a floating point number. So there is a little bit of extra checking here. So they've supplied a valid number, but it's a floating point number, not an integer. And so I've just got a positive message. You might want to do some more there, and a simple, you know, oh, sorry, that's a simple fail message, and this is a simple welcome message. So a little tip here, honest users won't hack your form data or your form client side, but there are people who are just trying to break into your website. So PHP needs to catch those people, and we will be expecting you to do a little bit of that in assignment 4. Now, so what I'll do is I'll just wait for any questions to come through, but I'll scroll down to activity 4. And I think if I click on this, no, it doesn't work. In the lecture notes, I do have a video that demonstrates this. This was really cute. When we were using Blackboard, so before Canvas got brought in, we had Blackboard, and I discovered that Blackboard allowed me to perform a cross-site scripting attack. And I did let them know, because I thought they probably want to know that their programming is bad. But they said, oh no, it's okay. We trust teachers. We don't need to escape teachers' code. And I'm going to be honest, it surprised me. But then a little voice in my head said, oh, cool, you get to show an actual commercial example of a website that allows cross-site scripting attacks. This is excellent. So for a few years, I was able to sort of demonstrate this. And Canvas, unfortunately, are a little bit more on the ball, and my attempts to recreate this have not been successful. So I'll sort of just step you through the video. What I have is I pretended I was replying to someone's thread, or I was actually posting a new thread myself. And because I had put some JavaScript into the message, this code was not escaped, and Blackboard ran my malicious code. So what I was doing is I was getting this box to pop up and just asking students to re-enter their student ID because the session has expired. And then the next window would have asked for their password, but I didn't want to get fired. So I just asked for a student's favorite color. But, you know, I could easily have asked for the student's password and perhaps passed on their password to my server, which would collect student IDs and passwords. But as I said, I didn't want to lose my job, so I just collected a student's favorite color instead. So this type of attack, very common, but it's easily stopped. The trick is we need to turn these characters, these meta characters, into HTML entity characters. So, you know, the ampersand LT semicolon. And there's a very nice function for that. In fact, there's two, because PHP gave us two. I think there's a subtle difference between these two. There's some extra characters. I think special characters encodes some extra characters, but the two functions are very, very similar. And what they do is they turn these into ampersand greater than sign and ampersand less than sign. And sometimes you need to, sometimes you actually want to. So any website that's accepting code, you know, like code examples. So Trevor, please can you help me with my code? I paste it here. And this is what actually put me onto this. Students were pasting their code and it was disappearing. And if they say posted code for a button, it would actually appear as a button. And that's what put me onto it, that perhaps Blackboard wasn't running this function or something similar over student input. And what I said before about assigning post variables, not running checks on post data, raw post data, it is very much like eating raw chicken. So your server is basically just accepting raw input from customers, and it's very important to run these functions over the input to make sure that there's nothing dangerous coming through, like some malicious code. So can I just get a quick show? How many people have seen this in the lecture series? I have got a video of it. I was smart enough to record a video before we switched over to Canvas a few years ago. And a quick shout out to George. Hi, George. Nice to see you following the code here. So Andre, yes, you saw the notes. That's good. It doesn't go for long. I think it might be even maybe 30 seconds or something. I'm not even sure if I've got any chat there either. It might just be a simple screen capture. So that's the tute. So it's a fairly big tute. I think even the lab is fairly complex as well. I'm just going to switch over to the lab. So excuse me for a second. I just want to scroll down. Yep, this is the link that I'm looking for. So I'm just going to quickly open that up. I'll make this a little bit bigger for those of you on low resolution monitors. By the way, this is a really simple sign-in thing. In the assignment, am I asking for this? No, I don't think I am in this assignment. So sometimes I set a sort of login, log out for members as part of the assignment, but obviously we ran out of marks for this iteration. So I'm actually logged in as Trevor and no password required. I didn't want to give the complete solution with a username password facility. And so I'm going to log out. So next week we're going to look at the session, but I just want to give you a bit of a heads up. This will help you with the assignment when it comes to putting stuff in the session. And I've got a magnifying glass here. And this is me writing to a spreadsheet. Actually, has anyone played with this? Sonia, I bet, is that you? That must be you. So we've got Matt and Tuba. Tuba's one of our tutors on campus. Matt is also a tutor, so that's good. So we'll be also looking at some spreadsheet functions. So I'm actually using PHP's specialist spreadsheet writing programs, functions, sorry. And that makes sure any data that's written to a spreadsheet is written in the correct format. So some of this data will be in quotes, some of it won't be in quotes. Please do not write a program to do that. PHP does supply functions to do this. And here's the source code. I'm really giving you a big preview of next week. Let me just check the time. Oh, we're over time. Are we? Oh no, we're definitely not over time. Got a bit paranoid there. So there's the source code. As I said, a bit of a heads up for next week. Some examples of just adding things to a spreadsheet, which you will require for the final assignment. So use this as starting code, or if you want to write it yourself, come back and just make sure your code is not too complicated. There's not too much to writing to a spreadsheet. I'll close that up and come back to the lab. Back up to here. So the first thing I strongly recommend is that you create a movies object and a prices object, which can be combined, or you can set it up slightly differently. This is just one suggestion of how to structure it. So if you think back to the pizza example I covered earlier, what I'd like you to do is think about how the movies object might be. So it'll be a mix of information and screening times. And the prices object you might want to keep separate. And I think, I'm not sure, Sonia, if it's you or someone else, I provided some feedback because I saw that you were actually on track for a different solution. You can even set up a prices object that has all the times in it that will return the string full or discount. So I think one student had started on that path and abandoned it, and I gave them some feedback that to keep going. But I can't remember if it was you, Sonia, or not. Anyway, whoever it was, hopefully they'll get a shout out tonight. And the other thing is, now this is an optional thing. But there's nothing worse than writing something in PHP and then having to write the same thing in JavaScript. So I actually wrote a function really for myself and also for any interested students. If you write something in PHP, I've got this function that just turns what you've created in PHP into a JavaScript object. So I might just open up the assignment. I thought I had opened up assignment 4. Oops, gone up too far there. That's strange. Thought I put some functions. Oh, here they are. Okay, helpful function. I'm just going to check. Did I just skip over that? No, it's right there. Okay, let me just 100% check I got that right. Okay. So what I did was I just included some helpful functions to put in tools.php. So the blue code definitely goes in tools.php. So it's like function declaration code, a bit like JavaScript functions that you put inside script.js. And the red code is how you call that function. So some of these may go in tools. You may want to put them in tools, put them in the modules, for example. But you may even have them sort of executing in index.php. So what I've got is, this is pretty much, you can copy and paste this into tools.php, and this is how you call the function. So don't do this, copy and paste into tools.php. Copy this, and then when you know you're ready to call the function, then here's the syntax, but don't copy and paste the red text. I've got this function here, output your file source code. So I'm asking you to do this in the footer. And again, that's how you call this function once it's set up. Yeah, this is the function I was looking for. So when you've created an object in PHP, an associative array, you can call this function, and it will actually output a script tag. And this is the name of the variable in JS. So this is what to call the variable, and it will echo that out in JavaScript. It will be delivered to the client's computer, and the client's browser will set up the JavaScript so that it matches the PHP. So this way, you only have to change the PHP. You don't have to change the JavaScript as well. So bumping back to the lab now. Yeah, so if you can give that a go, you'll find that that will save you a lot of time. And so exercise 2 is processing post data. So I'd like you to sort of write your own basic processing script. It can be a separate script for the moment, but I would like you to look at integrating it back into index.php. But if you find some better way of processing, you're welcome to do it, as long as the user is not inconvenienced by screen flashing. Your solution is probably fine. Actually, let me just check that. I just want to make sure that I've covered that in the flow charts. Yeah, I just want to check these are right. So this is one possible solution. and that's another solution. Yes, I did have a third one, but I was freaking people out, so I've really just got back to 2. But if you come up with a third solution, I do have another flowchart. Oh, are you saying it's dropped out again? I'm really sorry about that. Let me just stop the screen sharing, pause the video, turn the video on, and start screen sharing again. Has this gone back to top chat again? I'm trying to switch to live chat. It's back up? Oh, that's good. Have I just accidentally pressed pause? Now it's not working for me. Oh, man. Okay. Okay. So, yeah, it looks to me like it's not working. So I'm trusting you guys it is working. So, yeah, I was just checking. I used to have 3 flowcharts, but the third one was very complicated. But it was for people who wanted a separate processing script. But I strongly recommend, oh, now my video's back. I strongly recommend taking one of these 2 approaches. And if you really, really want a third approach, I'm happy to share that with you privately. I might release that in maybe the advanced discussion group chat in, sorry, the advanced discussion thread in discussions in Canvas. Okay, so what I want to do is show you a little bit of this flow chart about having a form in one page and having another page catch that data, and combining both the processing and the form into one page. So I want to show you, if you like, the very basic version, and both of these are available from form processing, the form processing menu. So I'll just pick the boring version first, if you like the crude version. And all of the code is down here, so it's a fairly short file. Notice I have a tools.php file, and I'm running the top module function and the end module function. So a little bit of a clue for assignment 4. So what I'm doing is I've got a form here, and I'm submitting to another script called BMI process.php. And so I'm just going to enter in some random numbers. Oh, actually, no, first of all, I'm just going to leave the fields blank and press calculate. And just notice that we move to another script called BMI process. And it's giving me a message saying you didn't submit data. So it's then saying do it properly. And you can see that there's script here. So I'm using the empty, and I'm checking that it's empty. And once I'm happy that it's not empty, I'm checking to see if it's numeric. And I'm generating a slightly different message. So if you submit text, it will provide you with a more specific error message. And I'll come to this shortly, but if it's not blank and it's numeric, I'll actually do a calculation to provide a more sensible message down here. Notice that I can come to this page directly, so I'm just going to press enter. And so this is one of the problems of having a processing script that you want to make sure that people can't access it directly. So people might just come to this page, but this page is only designed to work with form data coming to it from another page. So here's a link back to the original page. And so I'll pop in some text. And so I'm just showing what the post data contains. And I'm getting that you're entering a silly message, sorry, silly data. Go back, and now I'll enter in numeric data. And now I'm getting a sort of passing message. The numbers I put in are ridiculous. I'm not 10 meters tall and I'm not 10 kilos, but it's thinking I'm very underweight if that is my true dimensions. So all the code you need is here, but I strongly recommend trying to give it a go yourself and seeing if you can recreate this form. So that's two forms. So we've got the plain form submitting to the processing script, and the processing script provides a link back to the plain form. And whilst this works, it is a little bit clunky for users. They may get confused. And so what I'm going to show you now is a way of combining both the processing script and the form into one page. So I'm going to click on that link now. So keep an eye on this. You'll notice that this does not change. So if I just have blank fields, when I press calculate, I get some nice error messages here. These are server-side error messages, not JavaScript. So I'll enter, say, text here, and I'll get a new message. So this almost looks like it's happening in real time, but it isn't. A request is going off to the internet. I'll say that again. A request is going across the World Wide Web to the server, and it's coming back almost immediately. But it looks to the user that there's no difference. And if I just pop in 10 and 10, as I did before, I now get a new message, and those errors do not appear. And not only that, I'm getting some extra advice. So if I'm 10 meters tall, my ideal weight really is 1.8 tons to 2.5 tons. So this calculator probably not designed for people outside normal height and weight. So this is the code, and the first thing, this is very important, whenever you're writing a processing script, it's a good idea to set up some variables right at the top and make them blank strings. Set them to their default messages. So all of these, the height and weight, the height error and weight error, these are all blank strings. BMI, that is also going to be blank, but I'm also setting the default message. So if everything goes wrong, I want I want the message to say, please enter your height and weight. So this message will be the message that is being presented to users coming to the page for the very first time. Now what I've got here is I've got an array. I thought I'd just demonstrate a very simple associative array. And low is 18.5. So that's what the BMI is, and high is 25. So if I was Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones and all the other movies he's been in, I think he is exactly a meter tall. If you are a meter tall, your ideal weight is actually between 18.5 kilos and 25 kilos. So I think basically if anyone's got children out there, if they're a meter tall, they're probably somewhere between these two height ranges. or perhaps should be. But even then, I'm not sure it scales perfectly to children. So what I'm doing now is I'm setting a flag. So I could be counting the errors, but I'm saying errors found this time. So I'm setting it to be false. So I'm not saying errors not found is true. I'm sort of saying errors found is false. So at this stage, we're open to suggestion. So first of all, I want to check to see if post is empty. So has the user posted anything? I think I hit the mouse wheel there accidentally. If nothing has been submitted, this means I'm coming to the page for the very first time. So this is like me pressing enter. What I'm seeing is I'm seeing all of this, this default message, no error messages, and nothing inside these fields. In fact, I've even got a message here, post data contains nothing. So what's happened is it failed this, and so just jumped straight to the end and just echoed out the page by default. But what's more interesting is if we come inside and there is something coming through by post, but now what we're checking is that first example where I had blank fields. So there's basically the height and weight fields were empty. And I have a feeling if you have spaces, it will also detect spaces as being empty. The empty function is quite aggressive. So what I'm doing now is setting a height error, and I'm actually writing HTML, and I'm putting a space in here just so that my code is going to be neat later on. And I'm setting this flag, so errors found is true. Now, if again, if the post is empty, I'm going to check to see if it's numeric, and if it fails the numeric test, I'm going to have a similar error, but this time I'm going to say it must be numeric. And that's these little messages, subtle messages next to the text field that just come up. And again, I'm setting that flag, errors found to be true, because even though it wasn't empty, it's not numeric. And I do exactly the same thing for weight. So what I would do if I was a student, I would make sure it works for one field, get that working fine, and pretty much not 100% cut and paste, but basically roll out the same pattern for the other field. So at the end of this, errors found will be set to true or false. So it'll either stay as false. So if we haven't tripped any errors, this is where I do the calculations. And what I'm doing is and I have to remind myself what my little trick was. So just excuse me 1 minute whilst I... yes, that's, I just remember what I'm doing here. So what I'm doing here is I'm setting the number format to 2 decimal places. So I want the BMI, so this is purely cosmetic. The BMI string is going to be a number, but formatted to 2 decimal places. So this is very much like the toFix method in JavaScript. So I'm going through that little array, ideal weights that we saw above here, low and high. And I don't need the keys. So I'm not saying as, low, the key and pointing to the value. I only want the value. So I'm just saying ideal weight. That's another nice thing about the for each loop. You can just get the value if you don't need the keys. Now the for each loop will actually create a copy of the array, and I actually want the real array. So I'm using the ampersand. hopefully I'm not overloading you at this point, because I actually want the memory address. So I want the array to be passed as by reference, not by value. So when this for each loop modifies the values, it'll actually modify the array, not a copy of the array. So what I'm doing here is I'm multiplying. So as I said, Peter Dinklage, or if you have a child who's about 1 meter tall, what I'm doing is I'm scaling that ideal weight by the height. So obviously if I'm taller, my ideal weight is going to be more. And obviously if I'm 10 meters tall, I'm going to have to scale that number by 100 in this case. So so I'm getting ideal weight, and ideal weight is basically a to-fixed. It's a cosmetic version of this number. And I'm also tacking on a dot kilogram, just to be really, really nice. So what I'm doing now is checking the message, and I'm checking to see if the BMI is greater than 40. If it is, then I'm severely, very severely obese. All of these are taken from Wikipedia. I didn't make these up myself. If I'm between 40 and 35, so this is the trick, you know, check the top one. If that fails, you know it's going to be between 35 and 40. And you can just basically go down this ladder. And notice these opening brackets are stacking up. You can do really nice indentation that goes for 20 lines, but I tend to cheat when I'm doing this. I'll close them all in on one line. So what I've got is basically a ladder. This is like a really compact case block. And I'm saying, if it's this, then the message is this. If not, it's this. If not, it's this. And I keep going down to the final case where I say, if you're less than or equal to 15, so if it fails this check, then I'm very severely underweight. And then I build up this message. So I've got all the parts. So all these sub-variables, if that's a word. I've been creating these little bits of strings to go in the main string. So the message now is equal to your BMI is this, taking advantage of PHP's double quotes. Sorry about that, I keep hitting the mouse wheel. So your BMI is $BMI, thank you PHP, and you are message. So I've been building up this message, and I'm just popping that message there. So it's saying you're obese, overweight, or underweight, etc. And then I say you should aim to stay between. And remember before when I modified that string in the for each loop? So that is now modified. So I've multiplied that base number 18.5 or 25 by my height squared and the ideal weight as well. Sorry, the high end. So that's the 18.5 times my height squared and the high version of my weight multiplied by the high version. It took me a while to think this up. I will admit I've rewritten this code many times, and I'm always trying to make it slightly more efficient. So I didn't get this code first time. If you're a little bit overloaded at the moment. And I've just got this comment here just to let you know, if post data was sent, it's now being processed. So the errors and messages correctly set up. And now we can actually build the form. And because I've done all the processing, and this is really, really important, all the processing should occur before any HTML has been outputted. So all of this comes before the first bit of HTML, because this gives you a chance to bail out. So if there's something wrong with the post data, you can go to another page if you want. And but if everything is fine, then we start rendering the page. And now we can't go anywhere. We're locked in. The server is putting food on a plate. Do not interrupt the chef. The chef is now plating up the food it's cooked, or the food he has cooked, or she has cooked. And now it's just outputting this mouse wheel. It's driving me crazy. It's interrupting my train of thought as well. So we're outputting a message heading. I'm echoing out the message, but just to let you know, you can say $equals message if you want to do the short tags. Mixing a bit of JavaScript in here. I just want to show you how to mix in JavaScript with PHP. And here I am again echoing out height, but you can say $equals height. There's no problems there. I think I might actually update this code. I think that's something that is a little bit unnecessary, actually using echo. So I'm echoing out the height. Notice I'm actually echoing it out in the value attribute. So that number, what was previously posted, is being echoed out in the box. That's why it appears that I'm on the same page. I'm actually using PHP to output what I inputted back in the input box, if that makes sense. And I'm got no space here, and I'm echoing out the height error. That's why I put a little space in the height error, so it would be one space over, just to be neat. And once I got that working, I repeat that for the weight from the post and the weight error here. Stop it. And then just finally, I'm echoing out a horizontal rule. There's that horizontal rule. And I've got a custom function called table. That's not PHP. That's my function that I've got in tools.php. And I'm echoing out post data, and whatever's in post. But that's basically a sophisticated version of print_r or pre-show, the code I've given you an assignment for. And then after that, I echo out the end module, and the end module basically echoes out this page code. So as I said, those useful functions, I'm actually using one of those useful functions to echo out the page code in the footer. So all of this code was echoed out by the code that was in the end module, which I call down here. And I really hope that wasn't too meta. So this is an example of me declaring a function in tools.php at the very beginning of the file and echoing out one of the functions at the very end, as I have done here. So that was a lot to process, just making sure I haven't fried anyone's brains. No one wants to soak their brain in borax. So I'll just throw the mic back to you and see if any questions pop up. And I'll just, I'll close the tute so I don't keep going back to that window. Just check there's nothing else in the lab that I want you to cover. So all of this is good for coming back from the coming back. So if someone has turned JavaScript off, it's possible to put server-side error messages next to the fields, just as I've done in the BMI both example. And as I said, next week we will add data to the session array and to the spreadsheet. So that will hopefully finish off what you need for the final assignment. So I'm just waiting for any questions for this form, and processing post data, and also sanitizing post data with filter bar and also HTML entities as well. We will need, before you store any data, that's when you the analogy is, you actually start to swallow your food and it goes into your stomach. When you start writing data to the spreadsheet, that's where you need to be really careful that what you're accepting is not poison or being modified by hackers to mess with you. Okay, I'm getting no responses, no yes, we're fine, no, nothing. Getting very worried you might have fallen down. Okay, thank you, Andre. I was just looking at my video going, yep, they're both still up again for me. So whilst I was here, actually, I got a few questions from some last minute questions. Okay, so Sonia, I've got a question from you, so I'll reply to you privately. Okay, so Sonia, I'm just reading. Yeah, I'm just scrolling down. You have written a lot, so I will definitely reply to you privately there. I will say, Sonia, just I'm trying not to say too much. People in your exact position have been granted special consideration in the past. So that's all I'm going to say, Sonia. I hope that's useful. So yeah, I'll read that email in more detail just in case they have rejected your request. Okay. That's good. I haven't gone over time. I was a little bit worried with all the messing around. I was going to finish at 10:45 rather than 9:15. So are there any questions about tonight's material? I can answer anything someone's got in the back of their mind. Just going through, I've got another trying to see. I think that might be an on-campus student I got a message from. Gosh, I'm getting a lot of junk mail from RMIT at the moment. Oh no, is Stephen here? Might just quickly have a look at your question. Okay, so you've got an error in your page, so I'll probably have a quick look before I go, if I can. Okay, Stephen, if you're listening, Stephen, if you're out there, I'm just seeing, okay, first of all, I'm seeing on lick equals my function. So it needs to be on click. If that's a problem, then that's such an easy fix, but I'm going to assume that it's not that simple. But your function doesn't look like you're passing a parameter. So you will need to put a string between those round brackets. And that round string will be the parameter that your function picks up. So if you, for example, if you pass ACT as a string, then the function will pick up the string ACT and you'll be able to use that. Okay, so that's a quick solution. Have a look at that. And once I get home, if that's not the solution, I'll have a closer look at your code and see if I can see what's going on. Oh, again, Stephen, if you're listening, you have a parameter, sorry, an attribute called movie ID. No, the ID is equal to a string that happens to contain the movie ID. So, so your second example is getting closer. So you're using IDs that are named after the movie title, not the movie code. So the movie codes will never change. The action movie will always be ACT, but the name of the movie will be different. So when they put on a different action movie, you'll have to come in and reprogram all your websites because you're not using the movie code ACT. So if that helps you, I hope that does a good job. So I'm just going through the name list. I can't see Stephen. Stephen's not jumping out at me. But if you're watching the recording, that's probably a good solution. Okay, so I'll close tonight's chat. Sonia is saying just need to do the work. I've got some reading to do on the train, definitely, Sonia. So if you want to send any more information, please do. I've got almost an hour's trip, so I'll be quite bored on the train. So just yeah, send me as much as you want. Send me an hour's worth. I'll read it. Okay, so I'm going to close tonight's session. Thank you all for coming, and I will see you in the discussion boards, and next week, of course. So it's good night for me.